All right, YouTube. Fidel Castro has apparently finally kicked the bucket. He outlasted more presidents than almost anybody else. 90 years old. Finally smoked his last cigar. Now, responses are different depending on where you are. If you're in Cuba, they've declared a week of mourning or 9 days of mourning or something like that. If you're in southern Florida, people are cheering and firing off fireworks and having a regular celebration. It's like Christmas came early for the exiled Cuban community there. My own thoughts are Fidel Castro was neither nearly as good as he himself projected nor that his allies ever projected, but he also wasn't sort of the eternal boogeyman that he was made out to be. We should have ended the embargo there back in the 1990s. The Cuban Missile Crisis made him look like more of a tin horn, perhaps, than he actually was. He was just insular. He's here in the Western Hemisphere with a communist nation, or a de facto communist nation. Something certainly closer to actual communism than you'd find in North Korea, or maybe a mixed model China, or the latter day even Soviet Union. More of a purist regime in many senses. There are some benefits to such central planning, but at the same time, all those classic cars that you see, they have their own difficulties. They've been maintained much as is since the 50s. The architecture is basically the same. It's like stepping back in time. One thing that Obama has done, which he doesn't get enough credit for, is normalizing relations with Cuba. Now with Fidel dead, and Raul, I think he's in his mid-80s or so, he's his younger brother, and he's on his last leg too. We're seeing that the Castro regime is waning. I found it funny. I wonder if anybody else noticed how remarkable it was that you get the ultimate mimetic get saying fuck the leftists. I came out and said it's what's to come. And the next day Fidel Castro dies. He's sort of the linchpin of the entire sort of Cold War communism and leftism in general. Sort of this, he's sort of like Che Guevara. A lot of these like college kids, they wear, or at least from my generation, the younger college kids, they're like anti-tattoo and total straight and almost square in a way. It's actually very funny. But at the same time, like from my generation, like maybe a decade ago, just heading on into our college years, everyone's wearing like the Fidel Castro shirt and the Che shirt and the Stalin shirt and stuff, saying, hey, hail communism and stuff. It's very funny, and that's beginning to wane. The new generation's far more conservative. Fidel is dead now. Cuba's relations have been normalized. They're starting to get pumped full of Coca-Cola money, let's face it. All those tourists, they're coming to Cuba because their economy has been so depressed for so long, decade after decade. US dollars are worth a hell of a lot in Cuba, and there's a hell of a lot of them being pumped into their economy. It's not going to be too long before there's a remarkable change in Cuban culture. Raul's not going to last forever. When he's gone, that's sort of it. Exactly what else are they going to do? They're not going to shove their own heads back underwater once they see the kind of money that they're making. Once they see perhaps how easy it is to pay off even their sort of socialist programs with all of that extra Western cash, they're not going to plunge their heads back into the icy deep of communism for basically no benefit. It wouldn't make any sense to do so. They'd end up even the Russians at that point would completely ignore them. So Cuba's normalizing. People are, I think, somewhat rightfully celebrating. Fidel was a tyrant, yeah, a figure that suppressed his own people. But you've got to realize the American perspective on Cuba is a little bit different from maybe the European perspective. People from other parts of even NATO were fully able to visit Cuba a long time ago. Even people from the United States would visit Cuba routinely. They'd fly to Mexico, or they'd fly to Jamaica, or maybe the Dominican Republic or something, and then they'd fly into Cuba. Well, you couldn't fly direct, but you could go in a roundabout way. It doesn't cost much more. You go there, you can get like full meal for $1. You can get your lodging, in some place that's decent, has electricity, certainly like $20 a night or something. It's dirt cheap. And it is kind of like paradise. You have a lot of beaches. You've got a nice climate. Kind of humid, supposedly, in some parts of Cuba. But there's palm trees and Havana cigars and rum and all this other good stuff. I don't have anything against the Cuban people. I'm glad we've normalized relations with them. I hope that, by the way, some of that like vintage architecture and old cars, I hope that they're properly maintained and kept as is because they're beautiful. It is like a throwback to a prior era, and it's wonderful. The fact that people there are suffering, which in some cases they are, it's actually a testament, I think, to the fortitude of the Cuban people that they managed to survive under such conditions with such an ongoing embargo with their big next door neighbor, with that lingering resentment from the Cuban Missile Crisis. But Fidel dragged his heels on everything. It was funny, I think, back in, I think, the end of the 90s, or it might have been like around 2000, 2001 or something, Fidel Castro actually bought a bunch of dairy cows from Vermont. It was very, very funny. The U.S. government allowed a trade to go through, and we shipped him, I think, 300 head of dairy cattle or something, so they could get dairy production going. Very, very funny. You think some cow from from up here, in not exactly the most temperate part of the world. It's kind of like Finland or something, honestly. Goes down and then gets eternal vacation down in the Caribbean in a communist country. It's very, very... They became communist cows. They collectivized their milk output. But yeah, Fidel Castro's dead. Good riddance, kind of. But at the same time, he's been lingering for... He hasn't actually been actively in control of Cuba for years. Raul's been in control, and at this point, Raul probably isn't in control either. There are probably other people behind the scenes that are really kind of making the decisions. Like Fidel probably didn't want normalization of relations. He's probably like, fuck the United States. I still remember that Bay of Pigs crap. But, of course, by then, was in his late 80s, on his last leg. He did appear in public a few months ago. It's like every time before people start some rumor, oh, Fidel just died. You don't have any confirmation. But now it's on their state actual media. He is dead. He finally keeled over. He smoked his last cigar. He tin-horned his last population. And now he's, I don't know, some people think he's in hell. I don't believe in hell. I just think, okay, reincarnated somewhere. Maybe he's a space alien right now or something. That's about all. Peace out.